The beeping of the monitors should have comforted her. Steady, predictable, a mechanical promise that Daniel was still alive. But tonight, the sound clawed at Hannah's nerves instead, each beep echoing like a countdown towards something she couldn't name yet. She stood just outside the partially drawn curtain of her husband's hospital room when she heard it. A woman's voice, low, soft, intimate, too intimate. "Daniel, breathe for me, okay? You're doing so well. I'm right here." The tone wasn't clinical. It wasn't professional. It was warm, tender in a way that didn't belong in a sterile cancer ward at 11:47 p.m. Hannah froze. She had been gone for only 7 minutes. She'd left to wash her face in the hallway bathroom, to gather herself after another long day watching her husband fight the disease that had cracked their marriage right down the center. But now someone else was inside his room. Someone who shouldn't sound like that. She pressed her palm against the cold metal edge of the curtain, steadying her breath. Then she heard Daniel respond. His voice was hushed, almost shy. "I didn't think you'd stay this late." A short laugh from the woman, velvet soft. "You know I wouldn't leave you alone tonight." That was not how a nurse spoke to her patient. Not at this hour. Not like that. The air shifted inside her chest, something sharp tightening around her lungs. Hannah eased the curtain back an inch, just enough to see a silhouette. A woman sitting on the edge of Daniel's bed, her hand resting on his forearm, thumb tracing slow circles on his skin. Her posture was intimate, possessive, like someone who believed she had the right to sit there. When Hannah stepped fully into the room, the woman jerked her hand back, but not fast enough. Hannah had already seen, already felt the heat behind her ribs ignite. Daniel's eyes widened. "Hannah, hey, you're back." His tone carried something forced, a crack of guilt, a tremor he couldn't hide. The woman recovered quickly, rising to her feet with a calm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mrs. Parks," she said smoothly, "I'm Nurse Lena. I was just adjusting your husband's vitals." He seemed uncomfortable. But that wasn't true. She hadn't touched the monitors. She hadn't adjusted anything. She had been sitting close, too close. Lena stepped away from the bed, but her gaze didn't leave Daniel. It lingered, bold, unapologetic, the kind of look that makes a wife instinctively step between her husband and the threat. "What exactly were you doing?" Hannah asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Lena's smile hardened at the corners. "Providing support? Cancer treatment is emotionally overwhelming. Patients often need connection." Connection. The word hit Hannah like a slap. Daniel cleared his throat, avoiding her eyes. "She's been helping a lot," he muttered. "You don't have to make it weird." Weird. Her husband of 15 years calling her reaction weird for questioning why a nurse was touching him in the dark after visiting hours? But it wasn't just that. It was the way Daniel's voice carried a softness she hadn't heard from him in months. The way Lena seemed too familiar. The way Daniel seemed too eager to defend her. A flicker of instinct, old, buried, unwelcome, rose inside Hannah. She had felt this once before, years ago, when Daniel's late-night work calls turned into messages from a woman whose name he claimed he didn't remember. That betrayal had ended with apologies, promises, therapy sessions that never really healed the wound. And now here she was again, in a cold room with flickering fluorescent lights, watching the same shifts in his eyes, the same guarded posture. Lena checked her watch. "I should finish my rounds," she said softly. "Daniel, I'll be back to check on you soon." Daniel nodded a little too quickly. As Lena passed Hannah, their shoulders almost brushed. Hannah caught a subtle scent, perfume, faint but distinct, floral with a sharp citrus bite. It lingered in the air like a warning. When the door clicked shut behind her, the silence thickened. Hannah stepped closer to the bed. "What is going on?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. His breathing hitched, eyes focusing on anything but her. "She's just helping," he said flatly. "Don't start. Don't start." Her heart chilled. Something was already wrong, deeply wrong, and Nurse Lena, whoever she truly was, had her husband's trust in a way Hannah no longer recognized. And tonight was only the beginning. Hannah didn't sleep that night. She lay in the stiff hospital recliner, staring at the ceiling tiles, while Daniel drifted in and out beneath the dim blue glow of the monitoring screen. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that nurse's hand on his arm, that slow thumb-tracing circles, that familiarity. By morning, Hannah tried to convince herself she had overreacted, that exhaustion and fear were twisting her judgment. Cancer did strange things to people. It hollowed out patience, sharpened insecurity. She told herself she needed to stay steady, to be the supportive wife Daniel needed. But the shift in him started immediately. When Lena stepped into the room at 8:12 a.m., Daniel straightened in bed as if someone had plugged electricity into him. His eyes warmed, body language softening, a subtle but unmistakable transformation. Hannah watched him closely. He never reacted like that when a doctor entered, or another nurse, or even when Hannah returned after stepping out. Only Lena. "Good morning," Lena said with a smile that lingered on Daniel before she glanced at Hannah briefly, as if out of obligation, not courtesy. "Morning," Daniel replied, voice lighter than moments before. Lena checked his chart. "Pain level. Better now," he said, and though he spoke casually, the words carried a meaning that made Hannah's stomach clench. Better now, because she was here. Lena adjusted the IV bag with movements that looked rehearsed, elegant. She brushed Daniel's hand, not enough to be obvious, just enough to signal something Hannah wasn't supposed to notice. Hannah stepped closer. "Shouldn't the doctor approve any dosage changes?" Lena didn't even look at her. "It's within protocol." But Hannah saw the flicker in the nurse's eyes, a flash of irritation, a warning. When Lena left, Daniel let out a breath. "You're being overly suspicious," he murmured, rubbing his forehead. "She's just doing her job." "Is she?" Hannah asked quietly. Daniel turned his face away. "Please don't start this again." Again. There it was, that old fracture between them, widening. For the next week, Hannah kept watch. Subtle things became impossible to ignore. Daniel's schedule suddenly shifted. Treatments rescheduled at odd hours, consultations added without explanation. When Hannah asked why, he shrugged, claiming Lena said it would be easier on him. Easier how? Easier for whom? One afternoon, Hannah arrived at the hospital earlier than usual and found the door to Daniel's room shut, blinds drawn. She knocked. No answer. When she pushed it open, Lena was inside, standing far too close, her fingers brushing Daniel's jawline as she murmured something Hannah couldn't fully hear. They both jumped. Lena immediately adopted a professional stance, hands behind her back. "I was examining him." Daniel looked guilty. Again. Hannah's voice trembled. "Why were the blinds closed?" "Privacy," Lena replied smoothly. "Your husband was in pain." The lie hung in the air like smoke, and Daniel didn't deny it. That evening, as Hannah gathered Daniel's laundry bag, she noticed a small folded note on the nightstand, partially tucked under his phone. She picked it up instinctively. Daniel snatched it from her before she could unfold it. "What was that?" she asked. "Nothing," he snapped. "Don't go through my things." "I wasn't. Daniel, I said drop it." He never raised his voice at her. Not like this. Not with this raw edge of panic. Later, when he stepped into the bathroom, Hannah saw his phone light up on the bed. A message preview flashed. "I'm proud of you. Don't let her guilt you. L." Her throat tightened. She didn't touch the phone. She didn't need to. The truth was already bleeding through every interaction. By the end of the week, even the staff seemed to know something Hannah didn't. A receptionist hesitated when Hannah asked for Daniel's updated schedule, glancing down the hallway as if checking whether someone was watching. "You should speak to Nurse Lena," the receptionist finally said. "She manages most of his adjustments." Manages? Since when? Did a nurse manage a single patient's entire treatment flow without the doctor's authorization? That night, Hannah confronted Lena directly. "I don't know what you think you're doing," Hannah said, stepping into the hallway, blocking Lena's path. Lena's lips curved into a small, controlled smile. "I'm caring for my patient. You're overstepping." "Am I?" Lena stepped closer, her voice lowering. "Daniel needs stability, support, someone who understands him. I'm his wife." A soft laugh. Title doesn't always mean connection. The world tilted slightly around Hannah. Before she could speak, Lena leaned in, close enough that only Hannah could hear. Maybe focus on what he needs instead of what you think he owes you? It wasn't a warning. It was a declaration. Lena wasn't just a nurse. She was taking ground, piece by piece, right in front of Hannah. And Daniel was letting her. Hannah had always believed that when betrayal returned, it would feel familiar, like the echo of a wound she once survived. She expected numbness or a dull ache, or maybe the cold clarity she felt years ago when she learned about Daniel's first secret messages with another woman. But this time, the pain didn't echo. It detonated. It began with tiny fractures in Daniel's routine, things she only noticed because she was paying attention now. He left appointments early. He stayed late after treatments. He asked her not to accompany him to certain consultations, insisting the sessions were technical or too draining. Then came the slip from the hospital volunteer. Hannah had arrived 10 minutes early for Daniel's radiation appointment, hoping to surprise him with fresh coffee. The volunteer at the front desk smiled warmly, trying to be helpful. "Oh, his nurse is already with him," she said. "They usually meet early for their talks." Hannah's heart trembled. "Their what?" The volunteer hesitated, suddenly unsure. "Their emotional preparation. She said he gets anxious without her before treatments. They've been doing it for weeks." Weeks. Long before the night Hannah overheard that intimate whisper behind the curtain, the world sharpened into something too bright, too loud. She thanked the volunteer mechanically and walked down the corridor, each step heavy with dread. The idea that Lena's presence had become essential to Daniel, something he sought out, something he relied on, lodged like a splinter under her ribs. Still, she wanted to believe this was professional, misguided, but fixable. She clung to that hope until she logged into Daniel's medical portal. She only wanted to check the dosage instructions the doctor had mentioned. But on the left side of the screen, under appointments, she saw additional sessions scheduled at odd hours, appointments she had never been told about, all marked private consult, all signed electronically by Nurse Lena Halden. Why would a nurse need private consults with a single patient? Why without oversight? Why without Hannah? Her hands shook as she scrolled further. Notes written in a soft, careful script. Patient expressed emotional dependency. Patient requested one-on-one discussion. Discussed personal stressors unrelated to treatment. Personal stressors. Her stomach dropped. When she confronted Daniel that evening, he was distant, irritable, like someone caught in a lie but too tired to keep pretending. "What are these appointments for?" she asked, holding out her phone. He didn't even look. "Nothing. Just extra support." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you'd overreact," he snapped. Overreact. The same word he'd used last time. The same dagger. "Daniel," she whispered, "are you having an affair with her?" The silence that followed wasn't denial. It wasn't outrage. It wasn't confusion. It was fear. Not fear of the accusation. Fear of being exposed. He swallowed, hard. "Hannah, I can't do this conversation right now." "That's not an answer." Daniel rose from the bed, shaking his head. "I'm tired. I need space." "Space or secrecy?" she shot back, the words breaking from her chest. "Because you're giving her everything you're taking from me." Fury flashed through his eyes. Defensive, impulsive. "Maybe if you weren't hovering over everything." She stepped back, wounded. "So now it's my fault?" He grabbed his jacket despite barely having the strength to stand. "I'm going for a walk," he said. "Don't follow me." The door slammed behind him, but she did follow. Not immediately. She waited 10 minutes, long enough to convince herself she wasn't acting on impulse, long enough to feel the cold certainty settle in her bones. She trailed his path through the dim hospital corridors, down the quiet east wing, past the vending machines humming softly in the dark. When she stepped through the back exit leading to the parking lot, she froze. Daniel wasn't alone. He stood under a flickering security light, shoulders hunched, his breath visible in the cold night air. And Lena. Lena was in front of him, so close their bodies nearly touched. Her hand cupped his cheek, gentle, intimate, claiming him. Daniel leaned into the touch. Hannah's breath shattered. Then Lena stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Not in a comforting embrace, Not a professional gesture, a lover's embrace. Daniel melted into it. Hannah's heart didn't just crack, it collapsed in on itself. The betrayal was total, visceral, undeniable. This wasn't vulnerability exploited in a moment of weakness. This was a relationship, an emotional tether carefully built long before cancer tightened its grip on his body. The man she had spent 15 years loving was already lost, long before she ever realized she was fighting for him. And now in the cold glow of a parking lot, she saw the truth plainly. Lena wasn't supporting him. She was replacing her, and Daniel was letting her. Hannah woke the next morning with a hollowed-out heaviness in her chest, the kind that left her breathless before she even opened her eyes. The image of Daniel and Lena in the parking lot kept replaying, his head bowed, her hands on him, their bodies aligned like two people who had been here many times before. But betrayal, as devastating as it was, wasn't the part that gnawed at her now. It was something else, something colder, something calculated, a pattern she couldn't quite name yet. When she arrived at the hospital, Daniel was asleep, an untouched breakfast tray beside him. Hannah set her bag down, then reached into his drawer for his insurance card. They needed to update it with the new pharmacy. That's when she noticed it, a folded envelope, her name written nowhere on it. Curiosity flickered, but she resisted the impulse to open it. Instead, she reached for his wallet to find the card, and froze. The bank app notification on the lock screen showed a transfer, $8,000 sent to El Halden. Her throat tightened. She unlocked the phone. Daniel rarely changed his PIN. A deeper look into his banking app revealed more transfers. Smaller ones at first, $250, $500, $200, all to the same name, El Halden, Lena. One payment was labeled support during treatment. Another, thank you for being there. But the largest one, the most recent, was simply tagged, you deserve this. A cold, metallic taste hit the back of Hannah's tongue. This wasn't just an affair. He was funneling money to her, quietly, secretly, over time. She opened his financial settings, noticing a newly added, authorized user profile. Empty for now, but clearly being prepared. The request had been saved as a draft, not submitted. For Lena. Her name wasn't typed, but Hannah could feel it, like a shadow behind the form. She sat heavily in the visitor chair, heart pounding. What kind of nurse accepted private payments from a married patient? Why would Daniel be transferring money during cancer treatment when their medical bills were already draining them? As she scrolled, something else caught her eye. Hospital billing irregularities. Days where medications were billed twice. Days where no doctor's signature appeared, only Lena's. Days where Daniel received a different dosage than what the oncologist had verbally recommended. Hannah stood abruptly and walked out of the room. She needed answers. She found Daniel's oncologist, Dr. Patel, in the hallway reviewing charts. He looked surprised when Hannah approached him, but concern flickered the moment she started asking questions. Has Daniel's medication dosage changed recently? She asked. Dr. Patel frowned. Not that I authorized. Why? Hannah hesitated. Because I've seen charges for doses you didn't sign off on. He stiffened. That's impossible. Only authorized staff can... He stopped. His face drained slightly. Are these entries marked under Nurse Halden's login? Yes. Dr. Patel's jaw clenched. She's not permitted to make unilateral changes. That's a serious breach. I'll need to review this immediately. But Hannah wasn't finished. She lowered her voice. Have there been complaints about her before? A subtle shift passed through Dr. Patel's expression, like someone choosing his words carefully. I can't disclose personnel files, he said slowly. But I will say her employment history has gaps. Gaps. The kind that aren't created by promotions. The kind created by scandals. Hannah thanked him and walked away, pulse thundering. She called her friend Mara, who worked in hospital administrative audits. Mara agreed to quietly check Lena's employment record. That evening, Mara called back. Hannah, she began cautiously. This nurse, she's been reported before. What do you mean reported? For inappropriate closeness with patients, emotional manipulation, crossing boundaries. Nothing criminal, nothing provable, but enough that she changed hospitals twice in 3 years. Hannah gripped the phone. Why would she do this? Why Daniel? Mara hesitated. It's not just emotional boundaries. There were suspicions of medication tampering in one of her previous cases. A patient whose decline didn't match the expected progression. Hannah felt the world tilt. Did he die? Yes, Mara whispered, but nothing was proven. The hollow dread in Hannah's stomach solidified into something sharper, more terrifying. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't just emotional exploitation. This was predatory, targeted, maybe even lethal. When she returned to Daniel's room, he was awake, pale, sweating despite the cool temperature. His symptoms looked worse than usual, far worse than they should have been at this stage. He looked at her with a strained, tired expression. Where were you? Hannah swallowed. Trying to understand what's happening to you, Daniel. He closed his eyes. Lena is helping me. You're making things harder. But Hannah saw it now, saw the truth behind his words. He wasn't thinking clearly. He wasn't acting rationally. His decline didn't feel natural. And Lena was controlling his treatment far more than anyone realized. As Hannah stood there, something inside her clicked into terrifying clarity. Lena's relationship with Daniel wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a weak moment. It wasn't an affair born out of vulnerability. It was a strategy. And Daniel wasn't just unfaithful. He was in danger. Hannah sat in the hospital cafeteria, staring blankly at a cup of untouched tea, her mind spiraling through every red flag she had ignored. The transfers, the altered medical logs, Lena's sudden appearances, Daniel's rapid decline. None of it fit the trajectory Dr. Patel had described. It felt engineered, guided by someone with access, proximity, and motive. And now Hannah knew who that person was. But knowing wasn't enough. She needed proof, real proof. Evidence that couldn't be dismissed as jealousy or paranoia. Evidence that could stand against a nurse who hid her predation behind professionalism and a soft voice. Her first step was simple. She typed Lena Halden's name into every public record search she could find. The results weren't what Hannah expected. There was nothing overtly incriminating, no criminal charges, no news articles. But something else caught her attention. A pattern. Twice Lena had relocated following the death of a male patient. Both middle-aged, both wealthy, both with relatively stable prognoses until the sudden downturn noted in their medical files. She found obituary notices with small details that scratched at her nerves. Unexpected decline, rapid deterioration, comforted by close staff in final days. Comforted by whom? Hannah dug deeper. She tracked down archived staff directories from the previous hospitals. Lena's name appeared on both, and the timelines lined up too neatly. She left each hospital within weeks of those men passing away. A tremor of cold swept over Hannah's skin. This wasn't just moral boundary crossing. This was predation wrapped in compassion, hidden beneath sympathy cards and bedside vigils. She printed clipped documents, pieced together timelines, then returned to Daniel's room with a resolve she hadn't felt since this ordeal began. Daniel was asleep, his breathing shallow, his skin clammy, but his phone lay on the tray beside him, unlocked, still logged into a voice memo app from earlier. Her pulse quickened. She opened the app and scrolled. There were recordings, several, most short, a few seconds long. Static, soft whispers, rustling fabric. But the newest one was 3 minutes long. Hannah hesitated, then pressed play. Lena's voice filled the speakers, warm and coaxing. Daniel, listen to me. You can't keep letting Hannah control your decisions. She's overwhelmed. She's not thinking clearly. You need someone who understands what you're going through. Daniel's voice faint. I don't want to hurt her. This isn't about hurting her, Lena purred. It's about protecting your peace. You're the one who's sick. You're the one suffering. If you want me to stay with you, to care for you the way I have been, then you need to make sure you're not tied to people who drain you. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. Then Lena whispered, I need to know you trust me, fully. Change the beneficiary. It's not about money, it's about commitment. Hannah's breath faltered. Her legs nearly gave out. This wasn't emotional manipulation anymore. This was coercion. grooming a dying man to rewrite his life's assets out of desperation and loneliness. She saved the recording to her phone and backed out of the app. A knock on the door startled her. It was Dr. Patel. "Hannah, we need to talk," he said quietly. "I reviewed the logs. There are discrepancies I can't explain, and Lena hasn't responded to my inquiries." "What kind of discrepancies?" Hannah's voice was tight. "Medication administration, timing, dosage. Some of the entries conflict with what Daniel should have been receiving." His jaw tightened. "If she's been giving medication unsupervised, that's a major violation." Hannah swallowed. "Doctor, I think she's been manipulating him." Dr. Patel nodded slowly. "I'm starting to see that." He left promising to notify administration, but Hannah knew they needed more. Something irrefutable. Something that showed Lena wasn't just incompetent or overeager, but dangerous. Her next step was risky. She went to the hospital's visitor access computer lab and, using the patient portal's file directory, searched for any non-standard uploads. Hidden files, off-record entries. One folder was mislabeled with a string of numbers, no date, no tag. She opened it. Inside were scanned forms. One was a partially filled life insurance beneficiary form. Daniel's name was on it. The signature line was blank. The requested beneficiary field was typed but faintly smudged as if someone had tried to erase it. Hannah zoomed in. The letters were still visible. L. Halden. Her vision blurred. She grabbed the printout with trembling hands. This was it, the proof of intent. Lena wasn't just seducing vulnerable men, she was positioning herself into their financial futures, then leaving the hospital after their unexpected decline. But something was still missing. Motive wasn't enough. Hannah needed a connection, a pattern, a reason to show this was more than coincidence. So she searched for the previous patient's estates. The first man had left a portion of his assets to an unnamed private caregiver. The second had listed a sudden beneficiary change 3 months before his death. Hannah matched the dates. Both were during Lena's employment at their respective hospitals. The ground beneath her seemed to shift. Her husband wasn't just cheating, he was being groomed, targeted, broken down psychologically and medically, and Lena planned to inherit his life. Hannah pressed the printed documents against her chest. For the first time since discovering the affair, she felt something sharper than grief, something clean, steady, and unbreakable. War. Hannah didn't walk back into Daniel's room that night. She stormed. Every breath, every step was fueled by a clarity that cut through grief like a scalpel. Daniel was not safe, and Lena was not simply inappropriate. She was dangerous. Daniel lay half asleep when she entered, pale and drenched in sweat. The sight of him swayed her for a moment. No matter what he had done, he didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve to be poisoned by a woman who had positioned herself as a savior. "Hannah," he mumbled groggily. She steadied her voice. "We're changing things tonight." Before he could protest, she stepped into the hallway and called Dr. Patel. Within minutes, he arrived with 2 administrators, stern, rigid men whose clipped voices signaled this was no longer a personal matter, but an institutional emergency. "We need to monitor all medication entries," Dr. Patel ordered, "and we need to observe Nurse Halden's behavior." Quietly. Hospital administration did not take allegations of tampering lightly, but they also moved cautiously. Lena had senior staff allies, a reputation for being attentive, compassionate. They couldn't accuse her without evidence. Hannah intended to provide exactly that. She convinced Daniel to agree to an official review of his treatment plan, something he resisted at first, mumbling excuses that sounded suspiciously like Lena's phrasing. But Hannah persisted. She softened her voice, held his hand, told him she only wanted him to feel better. And though confusion clouded his expression, he eventually nodded. That was all she needed. The next day, Hannah sat quietly in the corner of the room with a small body cam tucked beneath her cardigan. Dr. Patel arranged for a hidden hospital camera as well, mounted discreetly behind a medical supply cart. When Lena entered the room during her noon round, Hannah lowered her gaze but watched everything. "Daniel, sweetheart," Lena whispered gently, brushing his hair back, "I brought you something to help with the pain." Heart hammering, Hannah zoomed in the body cam lens ever so slightly. Has Dr. Patel approved it? Hannah asked casually, not looking up. Lena's eyes flashed, quick, irritated. It's standard. Don't worry. But instead of logging the medication into Daniel's chart, Lena slipped a vial from her pocket, a vial with no visible label. Hannah's blood ran cold. Daniel, Lena cooed, you trust me, right? He nodded weakly. Then let me take care of you. Before she could administer the drug, Dr. Patel walked in. Lena froze. The doctor's calm voice cut through the tension. Nurse Halden, may I see that vial, please? Lena's smile didn't falter, but her hand tightened around the syringe. It's just supplemental analgesic. Then you won't mind showing me the label. A beat, a single, dangerous beat. Then Lena ran. She bolted toward the door, nearly knocking over the supply cart. Administrators sprang into action, blocking the hallway. The syringe clattered to the floor. Hannah rushed to Daniel, who stared in startled confusion. Security cornered Lena within seconds, but she didn't surrender quietly. She thrashed, screamed, her calm veneer stripped away completely. And then she saw Hannah. You ruined everything, Lena shrieked, voice piercing the corridor. He needed me. He chose me. You were nothing but noise. Hannah didn't flinch. Security dragged Lena backward, her limbs jerking violently as she spit venomous words. He was mine. He was supposed to leave you. He was going to change the papers. Administrators exchanged horrified looks. The scene blurred around Hannah. She felt distant from her own body, like she was watching the nightmare unfold through someone else's eyes. But she forced herself to stay upright, stay still, stay present. Daniel whispered her name, weak, small, afraid. When she looked at him, recognition flickered in his eyes. Recognition of the monster he had led into their lives. And maybe, buried deep beneath his remorse, a flicker of gratitude that Hannah hadn't walked away. It was the first time she'd seen the real Daniel in weeks. The police arrived shortly after, bagged the syringe, and escorted Lena away in restraints. As she was hauled out, she turned toward Hannah one last time, her expression a chilling blend of hatred and heartbreak. You don't deserve him, she hissed. You never did. Hannah exhaled slowly. No, she said softly, but neither did you. Lena's scream echoed down the corridor as the doors slammed shut. And just like that, the spell she'd cast over Daniel and his treatment finally broke. But the story wasn't over, not by a long shot. The hospital returned to a brittle quiet after Lena's removal, one filled not with relief, but with an undercurrent of shock. Nurses whispered in corners. Administrators exchanged tight-lipped glances. And Daniel looked lost, like a man waking from a nightmare, only to realize the damage was real. Hannah sat beside his bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. His color was already improving, his vitals stabilizing. It was as if someone had lifted a weight off his entire body, a weight named Lena. By evening, detectives arrived, a pair of seasoned investigators whose questions were methodical and merciless. They interviewed Hannah first. She presented everything. The bank transfers, the mismatched medical logs, the coerced voice recording, the life insurance form with Lena's name tucked into the beneficiary field, the employment patterns she uncovered, the deaths that followed Lena from hospital to hospital. The detectives exchanged looks that confirmed what Hannah had already suspected. This wasn't her imagination. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't a wife misunderstanding a boundary. This was a pattern of predation, a pattern that finally had evidence. One detective, a graying woman named Rivera, leaned forward. You may have saved your husband's life. The words hit Hannah harder than she expected. Her throat tightened, not with pride, but something heavier, because saving Daniel didn't change what he had done. The betrayal still hurt. But the alternative, burying him, wondering if she could have stopped it, would have destroyed her. An hour later, detectives approached Daniel. At first, he denied everything. The affair, the transfers, the manipulation, even the recordings. But as Detective Rivera played Lena's whispering voice aloud, Daniel's face crumbled. He broke down, not shouting, not dramatic, Just breaking. I thought she cared for me, he whispered, covering his face with trembling hands. I thought she wanted me. I was scared. Sick. I didn't know what was happening. She said Hannah didn't love me anymore. She said I was a burden. Hannah closed her eyes. Those words cut deeper than any confession. Daniel continued, voice shaking. She told me she could ease the pain, that she could stay with me longer than the doctors. She said she'd give me hope if I trusted her. Trusted her enough to sign over his life. The detectives took his statement, then escorted the syringe evidence to the lab. What they found in the preliminary toxicology confirmed everything. The vial contained an unprescribed sedative, one known to weaken respiratory function in cancer patients. Not enough to kill immediately, but enough to accelerate decline, enough to make a man dependent on the person administering it, enough to make him believe she was the only one keeping him comfortable. A perfect cycle of manipulation. Lena had engineered Daniel's deterioration, and she had done it before. By the end of the week, investigators discovered the missing puzzle pieces. Lena kept a hidden digital folder in a cloud drive, one that cataloged the financial details of multiple past patients, estate values, insurance policies, beneficiary structures, notes about emotional readiness and ease of influence. It was a blueprint for targeting vulnerable men, a ledger of future victims. And Daniel's file was the most detailed. She had tracked him for almost 8 months, long before he was ever diagnosed. She'd met him during a routine checkup, saw his high income, saw his marriage strain, and selected him. He wasn't unlucky, he was chosen. When detectives shared that final detail, Hannah felt something inside her fracture quietly. All along, she'd thought Daniel drifted into the affair because of illness, fear, weakness. But the truth was darker. He had been hunted. The case moved swiftly from there. Lena was charged with attempted homicide, medical fraud, financial coercion, manipulation of patient care, intent to defraud a terminal patient. Her mugshot aired on the local news that night. Daniel watched from his hospital bed, tears sliding silently down his face. Hannah didn't touch him, didn't comfort him. She simply stood near the window, staring at the blurred lights outside. When the report ended, Daniel whispered, "I'm so sorry." Hannah nodded, but didn't say she forgave him. Some wounds don't close easily. Some betrayals don't wash away. But she had saved his life. When she finally walked out of the hospital, she felt neither victory nor relief, only a quiet, lingering truth. Lena had nearly stolen everything. But Hannah, broken, furious, relentless, had stopped her. And while her marriage might not survive the wreckage, one thing was certain. Lena Halden would never hurt another man again.